While Elias slept, the stranger silently set a death trap just a meter from his head. It was a terrifying intimacy, a violation of safety that Elias Thorne, a veteran of the Appalachian Trails and the Pacific Crest, could never have anticipated. He had pitched his tent in the Blackwood Hollow, a section of the forest marked on no official map, driven by the arrogance of experience and the desire to beat the fading sunlight. The hollow was a bowl of ancient pines and silence, the kind of place that swallowed sound and light with equal greed. Elias woke not to the chirping of birds, but to a heavy, suffocating stillness. The air inside the tent felt different, thinner, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on his arms stand up. He lay still for a moment, listening. His instincts, honed over 20 years of solo hiking, were screaming at him. Something was wrong. He reached out instinctively to the mesh pocket on the side of the tent where he always kept his survival knife and his satellite GPS. His hand met empty air. Elias frowned, blinking the sleep from his eyes. He sat up, his sleeping bag rustling loudly in the quiet. He checked the floor of the tent. Nothing. He checked the small vestibule outside the inner mesh. His boots were there, laced exactly as he had left them, but his pack looked slumped, deflated. The top flap was unbuckled. A cold flush of adrenaline washed over him. He knew he had zipped the rainfly. He was meticulous about camp security. Someone had been here. Someone had opened his tent, reached into his personal space while he was unconscious, and taken his only means of navigation and defense. "Hello?" he called out. His voice sounded small, instantly swallowed by the dense trees. Silence answered him. Not the peaceful silence of nature, but the holding breath silence of a predator waiting for movement. Elias made a choice. He would not panic. He was a big man, fit and capable. If this was a robbery, the thief was likely gone. He needed to pack up immediately and backtrack to the main logging road, 3 miles east. He reached for his boots, pulling them on with trembling hands. He did not bother with the rest of his gear. He just wanted out. He unzipped the mesh door fully and prepared to crawl out. The morning sun was just beginning to pierce the canopy, sending shafts of pale light across the forest floor. As Elias shifted his weight to his knees to crawl out, a glint of light caught his eye. It was momentary, a tiny sparkle in the tall grass less than 2 feet from the tent opening. He froze. He leaned forward, squinting. Spun tight between 2 saplings, hovering 3 inches off the ground, was a line of fishing wire. It was almost invisible against the backdrop of dead pine needles. If he had stepped out standing up or even crawled out carelessly, his shin would have caught it. Elias stopped breathing. The wire was not just a barrier. It ran from the sapling on the left, up into the dense branches of a massive oak tree that overshadowed his campsite. His eyes followed the line up into the gloom of the leaves. The choice to leave quickly evaporated, replaced by a darker, heavier realization. He was not just robbed. He was contained. He slowly pulled his leg back inside the tent, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The urge to bolt was overwhelming, to tear through the canvas and run screaming into the woods. But the wire meant intention. It meant someone wanted him to trip. He sat back on his heels, sweat beading on his forehead despite the morning chill. He had to be smart. He had to think like the survivalist he claimed to be. But as he looked through the mesh, scanning the perimeter of his campsite, he realized the scope of his mistake. The hollow was not a campsite. It was a stage, and the curtain had just gone up. Elias moved with the slow, deliberate fluidity of a man walking on ice. He exited the tent, stepping high and wide over the tripwire he had discovered. Now that he was outside, the forest felt vast and claustrophobic all at once. The trees seemed to lean in, pressing closer than they had the night before. He needed a weapon. With his knife gone, he scanned the ground for a heavy rock or a sturdy branch. He found a piece of fallen hickory, heavy and rotting, but solid enough to swing. Gripping it gave him a sliver of confidence. He decided to check the perimeter. If there was one wire, there could be more. He moved toward the south, the direction he had come from yesterday. The ground here was soft, covered in layers of decaying leaves. He took a step, testing the earth with the toe of his boot before committing his weight. 10 yards from the tent, the terrain dipped slightly. Elias probed the ground with his hickory stick. The stick sank through the leaves without resistance. He frowned and pushed harder. The ground gave way entirely. A section of the forest floor, perhaps 3 feet wide, collapsed inward. It was not a natural sinkhole. Beneath a deceptive layer of woven twigs and leaves was a pit. Elias peered over the edge, his stomach turning over. It was not deep enough to kill a man from the fall, maybe 4 feet, but the bottom was lined with something. He squinted into the dark earth. Broken glass. Shards of jagged, dirty glass bottles were embedded in the mud, pointing upward. Elias recoiled, stumbling back. If he had run, if he had given in to that initial panic and bolted for the trail, he would have shattered his ankles and shredded his feet. He would have been immobilized, bleeding out in the dirt. "Who are you?" Elias screamed, spinning around, swinging the club at the empty trees. "Show yourself." The forest absorbed his shout. A crow took flight in the distance, cawing mockingly. The panic began to curdle into a heavy, sickening dread. He was being herded. The theft of the GPS and knife was not about the items. It was about stripping him of his advantages. The tripwire at the tent was not necessarily to kill him immediately, but to injure him. The pit was to trap him. He turned north. The slope there was steeper, leading up a rocky embankment. It would be a hard climb, but maybe the rocky ground made it impossible to dig pits. He scrambled toward it, his breathing ragged. He made it 20 yards before he saw it. It was not a wire this time. It was a snare. A loop of braided steel cable, heavy gauge, hung at head height between 2 trees. It was positioned perfectly on the only natural path through the brush. If he had been running, head down, plowing through the branches, Elias stopped. He looked around, his eyes wide and frantic. East, the river drop-off. West, the dense brambles. South, the pit. North, the snare. He was in a pen. He retreated to the center of the clearing, back to his tent. It felt absurdly like the only safe ground, even though he knew it was the center of the bullseye. He dropped the hickory stick. It felt useless against unseen mechanics. His hands were shaking so badly he had to clasp them together. Every survival manual he had ever read talked about exposure, dehydration, wildlife. None of them talked about this. None of them explained what to do when the woods themselves had been weaponized against you. He felt a phantom pressure on his chest, the weight of invisible eyes watching his erratic movements. The person who did this was watching. They had to be. You do not set a table and not stay for dinner. Elias crouched by his tent, forcing his breathing to slow. Analyze, he told himself. Look for the weakness in the design. His eyes went back to the first tripwire, the one right in front of the tent door, the one he had almost tripped on. He needed to understand the mechanism. If he understood the trap, maybe he could understand the trapper. He got down on his hands and knees, keeping a safe distance, and followed the fishing line. It was tied to the base of a sapling with a complex knot, then ran across the path to a trigger mechanism made of carved wood, hidden behind a fern. From there, a darker, heavier cord ran up the trunk of the oak tree. Elias tilted his head back, following the dark cord. It vanished into the thick canopy, but now that he was looking for it, he saw the disturbance in the leaves. A heavy log, perhaps 5 feet long and as thick as a telephone pole, was suspended vertically directly above the entrance to his tent. He shifted his position to see the bottom of the log. Pointed wooden stakes, fire-hardened and sharp as needles, had been driven into the bottom of the timber. It was a medieval gravity trap. If he had tripped the wire, the log would have swung down like a pendulum from hell, smashing into the space where he would have been stumbling. But that was not the horror. The horror was the knot. Elias leaned in close to the sapling. The fishing line was tied with a variation of a taut-line hitch, a knot used by campers, by people like him. But the line was clean. There was no dust on it. No dew had settled on the knot itself. He looked at the mud around the base of the sapling. The ground was soft from the humidity. There, pressed clearly into the soil, were two indentations. Knee prints. They were deep, distinct, and fresh. The edges of the prints had not dried or crumbled yet. Someone had knelt here. Elias looked at the tent, then back at the prints. The distance was less than an arm's length. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow, knocking the wind out of him. This trap had not been here yesterday. He had not pitched his tent next to an existing trap. The hunter had come in the night, while Elias was sleeping, wrapped in his bag, dreaming of the trail. A person had walked into his camp. They had knelt right beside his head, separated only by a thin layer of nylon mesh. They had silently, meticulously tied these knots. They had rigged the pulley. They had hoisted the log. They had spent hours constructing his death inches from his face. The silence of the forest suddenly made sense. It was not empty. It was holding its breath in anticipation. The killer could have slit his throat in the night. He could have bashed Elias's head in with a rock while he slept. But he did not. He wanted Elias to wake up. He wanted Elias to find the missing gear. He wanted Elias to feel the panic, to run into the pit, to trip the wire. It was not just murder. It was a performance. Elias was the mouse, and the cat was waiting for him to run so the game could truly begin. Elias felt a tear of pure terror slide down his cheek. He wiped it away angrily. He was not a person to them. He was a toy, and the toy was expected to break. Elias stayed on his knees, the damp earth soaking through his trousers. The terror was there, cold and sharp, but beneath it, a spark of something else began to ignite. Rage. Pure, incandescent rage. He had been spared in the night not out of mercy, but out of arrogance. The hunter wanted a chase. The hunter wanted to see him squirm. Fuck you, Elias thought. He slowly raised his head, scanning the tree line, not with the frantic eyes of a victim, but with the cold calculation of a man who had nothing left to lose. He looked for the anomalies, the unnatural shapes. There, about 50 yards away, in a thicket of rhododendrons to the west, a shadow was too still. The texture was wrong. It was a ghillie suit, a camouflage of rags and netting designed to vanish into the foliage. The figure was standing perfectly motionless, watching him. The hunter. Elias knew he could not outrun the traps. He did not know where the next pit was, or where the next snare waited. If he ran, he died. If he stayed, he died. The hunter was waiting for the panic to force a mistake. Elias reached into his pocket. His lighter was still there, a cheap, yellow plastic lighter. He looked at his tent. The expensive, ultra-lightweight nylon. Highly flammable. The ground around it was covered in dry pine needles, layers of tinder accumulated over years. He did not scream. He did not run. Elias stood up slowly, making eye contact with the dark shape in the bushes. He wanted the hunter to see him. He wanted the hunter to know that he knew. Elias flicked the lighter. He touched the flame to the mesh of the tent. It caught instantly a chemical whoosh of orange fire. He kicked a pile of dry leaves onto the flames. The fire leaped up, hungry and fast, consuming the fabric, the sleeping bag inside, the plastic of the ground sheet. Thick, black, acrid smoke billowed upward, filling the hollow. The serene morning light was choked out by a dark, swirling fog. The figure in the rhododendrons flinched. Elias saw the movement, a step forward, a break in the stillness. The hunter had not expected this. This was not part of the script. The mouse was not running. The mouse was burning down the maze. The smoke grew denser, stinging Elias's eyes, hiding the ground, hiding the trees, hiding the traps. It was chaos, and chaos was the only cover he had. Come and get me, Elias roared, his voice cracking with smoke and fury. He did not run away from the hunter. He ran toward the one place the hunter would not have trapped because it was already a death sentence. The river drop. Elias sprinted through the blinding smoke, coughing, his eyes streaming. He could not see the ground, so he did not look. He trusted gravity. He felt the heat of the fire at his back, heard the crackle of the pines catching the flame. He heard a shout behind him, angry, muffled, human. The hunter was moving. Elias burst through the smoke and hit the edge of the ravine. He did not hesitate. He threw himself over the edge. The fall was brutal. He tumbled through briars and rocks, the world spinning in a blur of gray and green. Branches whipped his face, tearing his skin. He felt a rib crack against a root. But he did not stop. He slid, scrambled, and fell down the 60-degree slope, an avalanche of one man. He hit the icy water of the river feet first. The current grabbed him instantly, dragging him under, smashing him against a boulder. He gasped, swallowing water, fighting for the surface. He broke the surface, gasping, looking back up the cliff. High above, through the veil of smoke drifting over the water, he saw the silhouette of the figure standing at the edge of the drop. The hunter stood there, watching his toy float away, carried by a force he could not control. Elias let the river take him. He was battered, broken, and freezing, but he was alive. He floated down the rapids, eyes fixed on the shrinking figure on the ridge. He knew he would survive this. He would reach the bridge miles downstream. He would find the police. But as the adrenaline faded and the cold set in, the victory felt hollow. He closed his eyes, drifting in the icy current. He had escaped the forest, but he knew he would never really leave that hollow. He would never sleep deeply again, because now he knew the truth that civilization tried to hide. There are monsters who do not want your money or your life. They just want to watch you realize you're already dead.